Christmas 1976, the Ford administration was coming to an end. I had my orders to return to the State Department, go to the economics training course. The phone rings, and Richard Holbrooke, at the time an unknown name, but in 2019 there would be a best-selling book about him. Richard Holbrooke calls me. They're about the same age. He has left the Foreign Service. He's a political appointee, about to become one of the youngest Assistant Secretaries of State for East Asia and Pacific, and he asked if I'll come over to see him. And Ambassador Frank Wisner, one of my mentors, friend of Holbrooke, met in Vietnam, had recommended me. I go over. Holbrooke is in the transition office at the State Department. I sit down. He's kind of got wild hair, long hair, curly hair, and said that he's looking for someone to be his special assistant, an important job in the State Department, working with a policy official, somebody who's making decisions about policy, and wants to tell me about his plans and starts doing that. And I'm there interested and listening, and he tells me about it for about 5 minutes, and then the phone rings. And as I sit there, he sits in front of me and talks on the phone for 10 or 15 minutes. He said, "Excuse me, I've got to make a call." He dials out, speaks to somebody else. He has these long conversations. He hangs up. We start to speak again. The phone rings again. He picks it up. He has another conversation. This goes on for about 45 minutes or so. I've been there close to an hour, and we've hardly exchanged words. And he turns to me and said, "I've got to go to a meeting with Cy Vance, who was the nominee to become Secretary of State in the Carter administration," and runs out the door. So I'm sitting there, and I thought, well, nothing in this for me. There's no job here, and we've hardly had an exchange. I leave, have Christmas, and it's after Christmas, approaching New Year's, and I get a call from Holbrooke, and he said, "Are you taking the job or not?" So I'm befuddled. I didn't know a job had even been offered. So I'm going, "Yes, sure." And he said, "Well, I'm going off to get married and going on my honeymoon. I want you to move into the East Asia Pacific Bureau front office, represent me, deal with the current Assistant Secretary and his deputies, and handle all the issues that come up. I'm going to be on my honeymoon. My new wife doesn't want to be disturbed. I'll be there on January 20th when the president is inaugurated and President Carter takes office. I'll be there then." And so he hangs up. I pack up my stuff. I go over to the State Department. I show up in the East Asia Bureau. I said, "I'm Ken Quinn. I'm a junior officer, and all these senior ambassadors who are running the Bureau are there." And they say, "Wow, we have an office for you here, and you'll be getting copies of all of the cables come in, all the decision memos. We'll brief you fully on this. We want to get your input." And so for the next days from late December until January 19th, they're coming to me, bringing up, what does Mr. Holbrooke want to do on this? What are his views over here? I, of course, have no idea what any of his views are. He and I have never really had any kind of substantive conversation. I wasn't sure I'd recognize him if he walked in the door. It was so brief, the time we had. And so I'm giving them feedback. I'm kind of temporizing. How can we hold on this? I wasn't going to just make something up unless I had to, out of desperation. And we spend these next 2.5, 3 weeks with me being involved, not keeping him informed. He doesn't want to hear from me. Finally, I get a call. He'll be there about 10 a.m. on January 20th. President takes the oath at noon, becomes president. So Holbrooke shows up, and I'm his first and one and only employee. And this is how our relationship begins. He walks into the office. I'm there with him. He's got now has a secretary, assistant who's there with him. He comes in, he turns to me, "You did a great job handling things up to my time now." That's what I've heard from the outgoing assistant secretary and all of his deputy assistant secretaries. I was so pleased to hear that. And we would then begin this incredible adventure of my working with him over a very exciting several-year period in which big issues would come up. The espionage case that had started when I was at the National Security Council would come to a head. We would be negotiating in Paris with the Vietnamese. It would be an incredible period. And Richard Holbrooke, Dick Holbrooke as he was called then, would be launched, headed toward the very top of the foreign policy world.